All right, good morning, everybody. This is the March 8th, 2022 Sturgis Parks Board meeting. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:05. And has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? If so, we'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
I so move.
I second.
Moved by Lana, seconded by Allison. Same with the minutes. Has everybody looked at the minutes? These are the minutes from our December 14th, 2021 meeting. We'd look for a motion to approve them as well.
Make a move to approve.
Perfect. Moving on forward, the next thing and the reason that we're basically having this meeting is we wanted to discuss the 2022 inclusive or ADA park upgrades and recommendations. I'm going to hand out to you guys, if you pass those down, this is a map that shows all of the locations of our existing parks. As you can see, we've got 10 different park locations throughout the city. And with that, in February of this year, the City Council did set aside $150,000 to be used towards some sidewalk improvements, bike path, and playground enhancements. Roughly speaking, we should have about $100,000 dedicated to making some park upgrades. Again, here's just a map of those different parks that we have. Of course, we have the Lions Club Park, the City Municipal Park. Just to the west of that, we have what we call the Woodland Park. The 6th Street Park is the one by the Community Center. Centennial Park is actually right behind McDonald's. Dolan Creek Park is the new neighborhood park up in the Dolan Creek addition. Willow Park is up on First Avenue, I'm sorry. Yep, First Avenue. Starline is up in the Allison addition. Up off Starline. Mead Avenue Park is the one down by the channel where you go up the hill where it turns into Nellie. We have the Rose Street Park, which is just off of the corner of Sherman and going up into the cemetery. So those are our 10 current parks. Those are all dedicated parks. Those don't include any of our sports facilities that we have. We have a number of sports facilities as well, but those are all our dedicated parks. What the council has asked that we do is make some recommendations to them. Probably what we'll be doing is we'll go over some items today, and then what I would ask you to do is we'll probably have our scheduled meeting. Our next scheduled meeting was for April. April 5th, we'll have another meeting where you guys will reconvene. And in the meantime, I would ask you to go around and maybe take a look at some of these parks and bring back your ideas and suggestions. One of the important things that we need to discuss is accessible parks, ADA accessible parks versus inclusive parks, and they're very different things and have different meanings. And sometimes I think that they get the two terms get thrown around and really not knowing what the meaning is. And so we're going to go over that a little bit today. And then with that knowledge, hopefully you guys can come back with some suggestions on what you would like to see. And then the next step from that will be this will be going. Our recommendations will be going to the infrastructure committee and then on to the council. So basically, not all playgrounds are created equal, especially when it comes to providing play opportunities for children of all physical and mental abilities. Whether a playground is truly inclusive or merely accessible for children determines on how rewarding of an experience the playground can offer to its visitors. What characteristics and features qualify a playground as accessible or inclusive, and how can we create play spaces that are warm, inviting to all members of the community? And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit this morning. Basically, accessibility to a playground is any playground that can be entered or reached without challenge, making it open to any and every child can be considered accessible. And when we talk about accessibility, we're talking about things, pathways, ramps, being able to get to the park. Some of our parks, like when we talk about the main city park, you have to travel a certain distance, whether it's a couple hundred feet to get to that park. Just about all of our parks, you're going to have to travel either from a roadway, across some sidewalks, things of that nature to get to the park. That's accessibility, is being able to get to the parks. And there's certain requirements that were required to be considered ADA compliant. Things that are included in that are ramps, slopes of sidewalks, width of sidewalks, what the paths are made of. For the most part, all of our parks are engineered wood fiber filled parks, with exception of 6th Street and the Dolan Creek Park, which we actually have what they called a PIP, which is a poured in place material that the park is. The engineered wood fibers are ADA compliant, but they're not necessarily considered inclusive. And so what that means is when we talk about ADA compliancy, we're a lot of the times we're talking about people who are bound to a wheelchair, and they consider the wood fiber chips will pack down hard enough that they are still wheelchair accessible. However, when we start talking about inclusive, we start talking about people or kids that have other physical limitations, whether it be crutches or some sort of leg apparatus or whatever. The wood chips are not necessarily always defined as being inclusive, because it still does limit people from being able to get to those structures. So that's what the definition of an inclusive playground is. It brings all children of backgrounds and abilities to feel a sense of belonging by ensuring every child can fully engage with the equipment without limitations. So basically, an inclusive park means that every child, no matter what their limitations are or their abilities, has the same opportunities as any other kids. So that's the same opportunities for every piece of equipment, that they can interact with each other. That's an inclusive park. And so there's a little bit of a difference between having an ADA park or making ADA upgrades and having an inclusive park or making inclusive upgrades. And this is just a good good statement that I found, and it basically ties that all together. And it's, well, all inclusive playgrounds are also accessible. Not all accessible playgrounds can be considered inclusive playgrounds. So an accessible playground does not always create the optimal space for disabled or able-bodied children to play and interact with each other. Inclusive playgrounds go above and beyond the minimum standards of accessibility and promote a truly inclusive experience, so every child at the playground can feel like they belong. Some of those characteristics of accessible playgrounds, again, are the accessible routes. These are your sidewalks. For the most part, most of the time we try and have a hard surface, a concrete ground route. When we talk about ramps, we're not only talking about the curb cuts, but we also need to have ramps off of those sidewalks into the playground. So like I said, when we have most of the wood engineered fiber playgrounds, in order to make those accessible, we have to have a ramp that comes off of the sidewalk and goes out into the playground. Transfer mechanisms, depending on what type of equipment is in that park, sometimes you need a transfer mechanism that will be able to move somebody from wheelchair bound onto the particular apparatus, or some other means of getting them onto that particular piece of equipment. Slide alternatives is another big one. You can't, when we talk about a completely ADA compliant, slides have to have ramps and not stairs, and the ramps have to be of a certain grade, and then you have to have a landing, and then it has to continue to go up, so that it affords those children, again, that are wheelchair bound, the opportunity to get to the top of the slide and then to go down to the slide and to be picked back up. So Characteristics of inclusive playgrounds are unitary surfacing, which again, that's more of the poured in place. That's about the only material right now that really qualifies to be a part of an inclusive playground is that poured in place surfacing. And a lot of parks anymore, a lot of the park structures or the playground equipment that we see, that's actually a requirement for that particular piece of equipment is it's got to have a certain amount of that poured in place around it, or the manufacturers won't even come and install it. We have some fencing, social play areas, spaces, calm areas, sensory components. Those are basically interactive components that kids, when you go to some of our parks, you see the steering wheels and the little bars that have things that they move up and down. Those are sensory components. Again, the maneuverable routes, that's contained within the park facility itself, various levels of challenge, equipment zones, and some forward-thinking play equipment. So again, kind of two different trains of thought on parks, whether they're ADA accessible or they're considered inclusive playgrounds. Some of our existing park conditions to consider as you go around and look at some of these parks. Again, most of our surfacing in our parks is engineered wood fiber, and while it is ADA compliant, it's not necessarily inclusive. Sixth Street and Dolan Creek parks are the only parks that have the poured in place surfacing. Most of our parks do not have a dedicated handicap accessible parking and ramps. Probably right now, I think the only one that I can necessarily think of that does is the main city park. Yeah, you're correct. Woodland does as well. A lot of our parks do not have ADA compliant routes or sidewalks, which is a continued uninstructed path connecting all the accessible elements and spaces. Some of the requirements of those are a firm, stable, and slip-resistant path, which again, most of the time we look for concrete. They're supposed to be 60 inches in width. If they are not 60 inches in width, every 200 feet, you have to have a widened spot so that people can pass. Again, that's just one of the requirements. We have a lot of our parks do have sidewalks running to them, but they're not necessarily that wide. So some of the improvements that we would need to make is to add some widened spots. If the distance from where we have our dedicated parking is in excess of 200 feet, we would have to have some widened spots where people can kind of pull off to the side and no different than a street and vehicular traffic. Ramps, they can't have a slope no greater than 12-1, and then they have to have a 5x5 landing, a running slope of no greater than 5%, and a cross slope no greater than 2%. So we have a lot of sidewalks that do meet that, probably with the exception of the passing spaces, but as far as running slopes and cross slopes, a lot of our parks do already meet that. We probably do need to do some work on some of our ramps. We got to put detector panels on some of them. And then we would have to look at the 5x5 landings. We probably don't necessarily have some of those. City Park and Lions Club gazebo, 6th Street Park are the only ones with restroom facilities. I think that's important. That's one of the items that is typically included in an inclusive park is some sort of facilities, and that they're ADA compatible as well. I think that for the most part, I know that the ones in the City Park and the 6th Street, and I think Lions Club is a little bit out of the way because it's pretty much by the gazebo, but those two are ADA compliant as well, they have wider doors and they have a stall that has the right width and the handbars and things of that nature for those people who have needs. So important to keep in mind that we have that too when we consider what improvements we think we would like to have made. Roughly, we went out and we've been looking at different pieces of equipment. These are three that we looked at initially that kind of fit that bill of being both ADA compliant and inclusive. But just for reference, these three pieces installed, the bid to put those in was $95,000. So again, when we're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 to 125, it doesn't really honestly go very far. Again, these three pieces of equipment, they did require a 20 by 30 poured in place pad around them. And that was included in the install price. But the components themselves are again, fairly expensive depending on what you can go. I would say you could plan on anywhere. I think that probably the cheapest piece of equipment that we've looked at that was inclusive would be installed somewhere around $15,000, and then they go on up to some of them are $30,000 and $40,000 a piece. So again, I think what we're looking for at this point in time is what direction do you want to go? And it doesn't make any sense to put some of these things in place if we're not following the guidelines to be able to get the people to them, which would include the routes and the ramps and things of that nature. We have to consider that, the parking spaces, the signage, things of that nature. And again, there's going to be a cost associated with that. So with that, that's kind of the information I wanted to provide to you guys this morning. I'll try and answer any questions that you would have. And then, like I said, what we'll be looking for is you guys to go around to the parks and come back with a recommendation of maybe what you would like to see done. If you want us to look and maybe we spend all the money at a particular park, or if we would want to try and do improvements to several parks. Those are kind of what I think the next step is, or that's kind of the direction I was given. And then we'll be bringing that to the infrastructure committee.
Well, I just want to say I'm really happy that I saw you put up there the calm spaces, the sensory, because I think a lot of people leave that out.
Right.
And my sister's an OT, so we kind of discuss this all the time, and obviously with what I've been working on. So I'm really happy to hear, to see that be included. I, again, thought of the little cabin that we don't really use. Maybe, I know it'd probably be hard to move, but if we could include that somewhere and have that be our sensory or calm piece somewhere. But out of these three pieces, I really like this piece a lot because obviously I have a young child, and I don't know, in the last 5 years, I've probably been in 5 different states and, tons of parks. What I really like about this is sometimes I've seen the top one used, and what I feel happens is a lot of times a child who is in a wheelchair is on that piece of equipment alone. And I don't see the interaction as much as I think these two bottom pieces of equipment are, because again, one of the reasons children go to the park is to interact with other children. So that was the only thing that I saw about that piece. Bismarck has that piece, and again, I visited that park numerous times, and I liked it that they could, ramp onto it, and it was a very slight movement, but no kids seem to ever stay on it very long. And again,
Right.
This just reminds me of just a lot of inclusiveness, and maybe this could actually be installed at, the 6th Street or.
So that's a good point, and kind of what we were talking about, and you nailed it. That particular piece on the top right would be considered an ADA accessible piece of playground equipment, while the other two are considered inclusive because, again, they allow children of any physical ability or mental to interact and play together. And you see in the pictures, you've got a young gal in a wheelchair, and then you've got a young man there that's not, and they're able to ride the same ride at the same time and interact. The same with the swings. So kind of two different pieces. The other thing to keep in mind as you go do your site visits, no matter what we install, it's probably going to require additional space. And what I'm saying is there's certain fall zones around. We have to have an area so big around equipment. So even though it looks like there's room, like, hey, we just throw that in the middle between that swing and that swing. Pretty much what we have now is at the required spacing distances. So anything new we would add would kind of have to be on the outsides. I mean, we'd have to expand what we currently have. I don't know. And again, each particular piece of equipment is different. And for example, the swings have a bigger fall zone than necessarily a merry-go-round does, because the kids can jump off of it, and so it gets wider. But once we kind of narrow down some equipment, then we can start looking at placement and things of that nature. But for the most part, we're probably going to have to expand what we already have to put in new features. I don't think right now, Cody, I can't think of any equipment necessarily that we would want to take out that we would replace. I think everything we have right now is in pretty good shape, meets all of the playground codes.
If anything, it'd be the Mead Park. When you look at the Mead Park, there's some of the stuff that was put in there that was, I think, some was donated. It was kind of not built as strong as other stuff. So that there's a few little pieces that are not very well built, but they're working fine. That'd be the place. The rest is all new stuff, and we've taken all the old stuff out, all the rest of the park. So it's kind of where it needs to be.
So again, when we look at those, for example, the Mead Park has 0 sidewalks, no parking, dedicated parking, no ramps. So we would have to include those items into it. So every park is going to have different things that we have to do to it in order to, like I said, probably the parks that make the most sense are our City Park and our 6th Street Park. Possibly Centennial. Centennial, believe it or not, those are probably our 3 highest use parks by far. And so those would be the ones that we would tend to usually look at. I mean, the ones that get the highest use, we want to try and make many as enhancements to those versus strictly a neighborhood park that maybe doesn't get used quite as much. It's just harder to justify putting that expense. One thing I will throw out there, when you look at the Rose Street Park, we will be making quite a few. I mean, we'll probably make all of the ADA required things. We're planning to redo East Main and East Sherman Street. We're doing a road project, sewer and water, and at that time, those curb cuts will be replaced, that sidewalk will be replaced. So that park will have those upgrades made through another project, but that's probably not till 2023 is I think when we're going to get that would be construction on that. So keep that in mind. That park, we would make those improvements. If that's a park you guys choose to make want to do some enhancements to, we would probably include in on that road project the parking spaces as well. Now would be the time to do it while we're tearing the road up. So,
Is this one-time funding, or will it be?
I think the council's goal is to continue to make improvements. I don't know that it's always going to be $100,000 every year for improvements.
This was one-time funding with extra sales tax money that we got, but
Our capital improvement budget does have some money.
Maybe.
Let me find that.
Yeah. Not that amount. Though.
We continually, and when we talk about the that's the only caveat to the capital improvement. We have a line item in there to make ADA upgrades that now brings into our sports facilities as well. It's not just playgrounds. So
I have a question about Rose Street because, I grew up on Paisley, Nellie, that whole area or whatever. Unfortunately, I wish we always played at Mead Avenue, which is honestly the dumpier park. It is compared to Rose, but everybody always went to Mead. So I was just wondering the parking, because isn't there like an alley right here? So, and then here's your street here. Could you do the parking off the alley?
we could, and we looked at that the other day, a couple of weeks ago. We walked through there with the engineer that's doing the design on that, and that's one of the things we looked at. We haven't finalized anything yet. They're just getting working on that project, and as we develop those plans, like I said, we'll probably finalize some of that stuff. Some of the big things that we did ensure that we were going to have, because most of that area, a lot of it, probably 80% or maybe even higher, doesn't even have sidewalks. So that's probably one of the part of that project is to add sidewalks as well to that entire area. And so we're going to be making those improvements already.
So we can make it more ADA compliant
Yes.
without even coming from this budget, or it comes from
Yes,
another-
it will happen through that project. Yes. I mean, some of the things that we need to look at will be, like I said, all of our parks, other than the ones with the port in place, where the surface is even with the sidewalks. I mean, we have to have ramps that go off into the wood. For example, a ramp. I looked through a couple of these different books, and they range anywhere from $500 on up to, I think the most expensive I seen was $900. But that's for a ramp. And so now if we're talking about 4 or 5 of those, so we have multiple, again, points of entry and exit, I mean, it adds up fairly quick. So,
the sidewalk going through the main park, is that compliant with the whole passing, or no?
yes.
It is.
Yep.
And then the one that encircles the main,
Yeah, that's 5 foot. Yeah. Yep.
that's wide.
So in 2024, there's another 100,000. In 2026, there's another 100,000, and in 2027, 150,000.
So that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed about like even the ability to get, like, say if we even wanted one of these, like, are we able to order it and get it, or is it?
14 weeks.
I talked to him, he says, this is the end of February, they can have it here in probably about 3 months. Now, that was end of February, because stuff starts to, everybody just put their orders in now, and so it's gonna slow down. But he said, we could still probably get this and have it put in before fall, if you didn't order it too late. You order it in June or July, it's not gonna get.
The bid we got was 14 to 16 weeks lead time. So, and then it's weather dependent on being able to, of course, the port in place and a lot of that stuff.
So not Amazon Prime delivery time.
No.
And the important place, it has to have a hard surface, so usually you have to have asphalt or concrete.
Underneath
That's
of them.
on top of it. So it's a nice new surface, so that's where kind of there's a lot of expense there. I mean, just that rocker thing alone was $35,000 just by itself.
Yeah. I think that might be something though, like whatever we decide, that we need to make sure that people realize that, because a lot of people think, and that was longer than what I thought it could be, is that just to get the product is going to take months.
And that's changing every day. Every day I'm getting things that were supposed to be here are continuing to get delayed and delayed and delayed. That's just the world we live in right now, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And some of it isn't even necessarily manufacturing. Some of it then becomes delivery. I mean, there's not people to deliver stuff, even though it's sitting on the East Coast. We can't get it here. So yeah, that's a good point. I think, like I said, in talking to the council, they wanted to take this approach because they were not necessarily dead set that I think they wanted to have a plan put in place by this year, but not necessarily a deadline that, hey, all this money is spent and done and everything's installed by June. I mean, that is not the goal.
Have you seen some different swing options? I know that there's always like the standard brown one that comes over the top. But I've seen a lot of others too.
So there's a lot of different swing options, and again, it depends on what the goal is, and if the goal is to have somebody who is wheelchair bound be able to swing, you're kind of limited to the ones that they can roll on and then swing, or the other aspect, we can do some other swings, but then you have to have that transfer equipment that's able to pick them up and put them into the swing, and truly to be compliant, that's what it requires. No different than if you go to our community center and you see the hot tub, we've got the transfer equipment that brings the person out of the chair into the pool. That type of stuff is what we would have to look at if we look at a different style of swing. But the different style of swing is more inclusive. A lot of people can use it versus one that simply, again, like you said, that a wheelchair would go on. A lot of times they don't get used as much.
If we do any of the widening, like we wanted to upgrades the bike path or just sidewalks in general, I was just wondering if we'd be able to kind of snip a little bit of that sidewalk funding to make any of the park stuff.
Possibly.
I mean, it's kind of,
And that's what we would look at more towards some of the capital improvement money is that's typically what we do with that is we're continuing to make sidewalk improvements and ramps and things of that. So there's an opportunity. I think at this point in time, I don't think we've got to get, dot all the I's and cross the T's on exactly what we want. I think right now we're looking for more of what's the direction. Do we want to make ADA accessible improvements, or do we want to try and make, my suggestion would be is if you want to try and make a park totally inclusive, you're probably going to need to pick a park and really start to put a lot of, because it's going to get very expensive very quick. Or we can do some smaller projects at several parks. It just kind of two different paths to go down.
well, and I think, and just because I spend a little bit of time talking about this, I think sometimes too, if you want to do the whole ADA, sometimes it's cheaper to start fresh. So if we do another, if that goes through, and we do the eight, the other park goes through, we could have that park be the ADA.
So some of the parks I was looking here the last week or so, some of the what they consider to be an inclusive park, a brand new park. I think on the low end, I was seeing like $400,000 on up to, and again, it determined by the size and what you put into it. But for example, do you remember, Cody, what that play structure up at the Dolan Creek, that was $190,000?
Yeah, with the flooring and everything. And Spearfish just put a whole inclusive one in. I think they had 275,000, like I said, for just one.
So when we're looking at those structures, it's a whole different structure. Again, it's got to have the ramps versus the stairs, and so like I said, it gets fairly expensive. So to start from scratch on a park, I would guess, like I said, you'd be looking at anywhere from $250,000 on up.
Because like with the main one and, the main park, there's, that structure, I don't think we could ever have be ADA.
No, you can't really retrofit existing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, and we have, and I should have brought it, I'm sorry, maybe I'll forward it to you guys in an email, is our parks are not all created or designed equally. And so what I mean by that is certain playground equipment is designed for certain age groups of children. And so again, our main city park it has a lot of components across the different age spectrums. But for example, the 6th Street Park, when we put that in, it was really geared towards, and I don't remember what the age, I want to say it was the younger, yeah. So each play piece of equipment is designed for an age group of kids, and especially when you start talking about the sensory equipment and, for example, you wouldn't, on a little kid, you're not going to put in all the monkey bars and climbing walls and things of that nature necessarily that you would for the older kids. But our parks are, for the most part, we've tried to keep them age specific, with exception, like I said, I think City Park has a little bit of mixture of a lot of different components, but some of our neighborhood parks and other ones are designed for specific age children. And I'll find that document. We've got it listed, inventoried, and I'll send that out.
You know, did you look at some of those swings? Like, do you think we'd be able to get one, like the round, you know, merry-go-round thing and like two swings, or is what?
We could do, I think that's possible.
The swings were the cheapest one. Like we have one of those round swings in Centennial. If you guys see that blue in Centennial, I think that was like $6,800. Now that's with no port in place. You know, so you got concrete on that, and you got the port in place. So you're probably talking 15, 20 by the time you're all done for that, you know, just for that thing. But we got a good deal on that because they accidentally sent it to us. We didn't even order it, and then they didn't want to take it back. So they said, "Well, how about we just sell it to you?" It was like $3,000-4,000 under cost. So we got that really cheap. We just installed it.
I think
So those are a lot more affordable than those other things.
Yeah.
Get expensive.
I do think we need one swing with at least so the core, you know, some kids can't hold up their core, so you have to hold up their core for them.
We've got that at 6th Street.
Yeah. Well, and I like it, you know, but I'm just saying, I think when people think of 80s, that's what they're thinking of. But, and that swing isn't bad, but I just think there's a lot of different, you know, varieties. I saw one thing that was pretty cool. I think this might have been in Pittsburgh, but, so they had that swing and they actually had it on a zip line. And it was pretty cool. It was super popular. And I think that's like another example of, the piece of equipment was used by everyone, and it was ADA compliant because they had the port and they did all those other things. So you could get, you know, it was inclusive because everyone could use it. But they had, you know, it was an expensive park and stuff. But I did think that was a really cool to take that swing and then stick it on a zip line. Like, who would have thought, you know? But and it was an extremely popular piece of equipment too, because I just think about that too. Whatever we spend the money on, I want to make sure that that piece of equipment is actually utilized and doesn't just sit vacant to check mark something. So.
We haven't taken on any new parks. We haven't had any since the Dolan Creek Park. We haven't had any, I guess, designed. And probably the only other subdivision that really has gone through is Garden Grove. We didn't feel the need for one there. Not to say we haven't gone far enough into the process on the new proposed subdivision north of town. But I could certainly see, probably because of accessibility to our other parks and lack of bike paths and things, that they would have a neighborhood park.
That is a good question. Like, what are they going to suggest? Any, you know, like in Vernon Heights, we had a park, and it's actually utilized all the time by the daycare too. But are they going to ask, hey, can you have a park? And
They have a lot of open space and green space in what we've seen so far, and those would typically be the where those parks would be built. Like I said, we're so early into that. I mean, we're looking at just preliminary stuff. I don't think it's probably prudent to talk about those parks. I mean,
There would end up being a park though in that area. I mean, but at this point, it's not designed. There is going to be one there, and at that point, it would end up being ADA compliant as part of it.
and that's kind of what happened with the Dolan Creek is we said you have to have a park, and again, that one is a very functional. It is ADA compliant. It's, for the most part, it's pretty much, there's not a lot of maintenance on it. It's kind of a maintenance free. It's got a basketball court. It's got the play structure. It's actually got the, you know, the canopy over the top, things of that nature. So when that developer, he had to set aside so much money, and then at the time, the park board and the Public Works and Parks Division kind of picked what we wanted. You know, even as far as color theme and everything was picked out.
we're very much involved in that.
Yeah, they kind of gave us the money and we managed it and built the park. So yeah.
I guess some of that is
Yeah,
That would be, that, those funds that we talked about earlier, those will be available for upgrades at
to existing stuff.
so not new ones. So any of the new ones will have some sort of ADA equipment that will be chosen probably 18, 24 months from now. But the, this 100,000 plus the other 3 buckets, that will be for future upgrades at existing, wherever you guys choose.
Because the developer does. the
Right,
initial
they'll fund
costs.
those, right. It'll be part of their project costs.
So with 100,000, we'll have a little bit more because of the balance from last year. Would that be correct?
No,
No, this is
no,
out of the balance from last year.
yeah.
So out of the extra funds from last year, the council set aside 150,000 for sidewalk, intersection, and playground ADA improvements.
Well, and then, but if we have another, if it takes until the fall to put in, then we should
So
come up
there,
with.
there's some other projects, and again, we have some capital improvement money, but there's some other projects and improvements that we need to make. So again, it's not necessarily all of that money, and at this point in time, we don't know how much, but we've got some sidewalk widening we're going to be doing along Ballpark. We've got some ADA improvements we're going to make at Ballpark and Junction. Some of it's fairly minor with just some different ramps and detectors and things of that. But till we get all those pulled through, we don't necessarily, again, know exactly to the dollar how much we have for these improvements. But again, if we could get some kind of an idea, we can start working on putting together a plan. Sometimes, if we end up waiting until later in the year, sometimes towards the end of the year, we can get a break on particular equipment because they're trying to, they got the new model. It's like a car, towards the end of 2022, you can buy a 2021 and a 2022 a lot cheaper than you can buy a 2023. So there's that falls through with playground equipment too, because like I said, as they're making an upgrade and new models, sometimes we can get some of the older stuff a little bit at a discounted price. And it doesn't mean, it's still good and it's still under warranty. It's just they're coming out with a new model, a new color, a new whatever.
So I don't build sidewalks, so this is just a question. That might sound stupid to people who do. So like with the Ballpark Road, you don't rip out the old stuff.
No, we're going to actually add to that. That sidewalk's actually fairly narrow. It's just a little over 3 feet wide. And so we're going to actually go all the way to the curb. We're going to add another 3 feet. So it's more of like a bike path because that thing gets used so much and it's so, you got to kind of wait and let people pass when you go by it. It becomes, it's kind of troublesome and it takes us a long time to clear snow off of it because it's so narrow. We can't use a bigger piece of equipment and go down it and throw it off. It's just, and again, it leads to our ball facilities, our schools. So that was a one that we identified last year that we wanted to make improvements to. And so just so happens that the funding come through this year. That's typically how a city project works. Once we identify it, it's usually a year or maybe even 2 or 3 before, just like we were talking about the East Main and East Sherman. We identified those 4 or 5 years ago, and we're finally got the funding put in place and got it programmed into the capital improvement plan where we can start moving forward with it. So unfortunately, that's how most government works process. It's not overnight. It takes planning and preparation. So yeah, we kind of have a master list of things that we need to get done, and we wait for the opportune time to do those.
And I'm just going to say this last thing, and just because I've already been to all these parks or whatever, just in my opinion, I think if we would maybe focus on a couple of the parks and put the majority, like Lions Club Park, there's nothing wrong with Lions Club, but maybe it would cost more to make that park more, accessible, and it's not a park that's used as often as some of the other parks. So that would just be my 2 cents on it.
And you're right. For example, the Lions Club Park is, we don't have any hard surfacing anywhere to it. I mean, it's all gravel. So, and there are some things we're looking again at the East and West Main projects. There's some things that we have asked the engineers to look at doing as far as accessibility to that park, to make it more accessible or at least seasonally accessible. And we'll put those out probably as an option when we bid that project out. So once we see we have a certain amount of the project we need to get done, which is the roads, the sidewalks, the sewer, and the water. If for whatever reason we end up with a good bid or a low bid, then we'll have the bid alternates that maybe we can look at doing things. Even the Lions Club, the gazebo, we'd like to have access off of Main Street down to it, and probably look at closing off the access off of Lozelle, just because of how dangerous it is. When you get down there, you're right in the S curves trying to pull out, and usually pull out, most of the time you're not going right. So you're pulling all the way across the full lanes of traffic to try and make a left-hand turn. And it's dangerous. We've got a spring up there that seeps water. And so all throughout the fall and the winter, that road is a sheet of ice, and there's nothing we can do. I mean, the spring comes and goes. Sometimes it's leaking water, sometimes it's not. But it's just a very dangerous, road. Probably we would look at the same thing for the park component of it, is coming off of Main Street and closing off the intersection onto Lozelle down there. Because again, it's a kind of a dangerous, and that's why people don't use it. They don't feel comfortable getting to it. It's hard to get in and out of there with that traffic and the speeds. So if we can kind of make some different accesses to it, those are things that again, we have programmed in through different projects that will only enhance, and then maybe that does make a better decision that, hey, now we should do some improvements to this park.
I think that would changing that roadway and doing the accessibility from the top. I think that would change the whole mood of that whole park.
I mean,
'Cause it
probably the neighborhood.
true. I mean, because I grew up in close. It's just kind of had like a kind of a dark kind of feel. But then that one person came in and tore down that old house and did a brand new, beautiful. I think I can't remember who did that, but it's beautiful. But
Yeah, Cody and his guys have done a good job too of really cleaning up that hillside, and I don't know if a lot of people don't notice that, but you can actually see it now. You can see the hillside, and before it was just I don't know what it was. It was a lot of trees and shrubs and garbage, but they've done a wonderful job of cleaning that up, and again, it makes it more appealing, more inviting, and yeah, I think in the future we'll see some of those get used much more.
if they close that road too, you might get more green space.
Right.
I've always thought the gazebo would be a good place to like get married, but then like you're talking just the parking, the kind of accessibility, it just
It's hard.
yeah.
Rick, your recommendation sort of Centennial and 6th Street Woodland Park would be
Those are the three we see get used the most.
so Woodland you have a little bit ADA, there's all parks have some kind of equipment.
6th Street and the City Park. Well, Centennial's got the saucer swing.
Woodland, I don't think has anything that's ADA at all.
When we talk about Woodland, we're talking about when you go into the left is Woodland. Where the old one-eyed Jack structure is. And there's not much for park there. I mean, as far as playground equipment, yeah.
Did anyone ever reach out to McDonald's about trying to kind of do a partnership to improve that Centennial?
Again, if we identify that's where we would like to make improvements, maybe that's something we would do. I think at this point in time, to reach out to them and then and they commit and we don't. We don't. But yeah, I think if that's identified, and again, Cody's done a lot of work up there, grading and.
Rick, what were your most used parks? What three you said were Centennial? What were the other two? What were you most used?
I would say the main City Park and then the 6th Street Park.
Okay.
Centennial is used by more out-of-town people than any park because of McDonald's.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when the lobby was closed. Now it's not as bad because the lobby's open inside, but before they'd stop there, they'd eat right there. So in terms of amount of trash, that was by far the most trash of any park every day.
Yeah, I think maybe trying to team up with, I mean, maybe they won't be receptive to that, but even assisting with the trash stuff, because you want our parks and towns to look nice.
I would think we'd have a good shot. I mean, Kelly's usually pretty open to that stuff,
He's
so.
a good guy. And he's pretty, he's very supportive of
Yeah,
all the
yep.
inclusiveness.
Yeah, we'd definitely reach out to him and if nothing else, let him know what our plans are. And
Mm-hmm.
It's in the works. The insurance claim has been made and it's actually ordered, and it's just a matter.
April 1st of May, the crew should be here to start fixing the 2 pillars in the ground, put new structure up. One little piece of equipment got broke, that's being shipped. We just bolt it on. But hopefully, June 1st, they're saying it should be out of there and gone.
So in April, would we be looking at just choosing a different kind of parks, or?
I think so. I think that's kind of the direction would be, what do we want to try and do? Do we want to try and pick a park or pick several parks? And then based on that decision, then what do we want to do?
And by?
That would help everybody, I guess, if you got a bid sheet, sort of broken down, this equipment, you just pick out 4 different things and then only one.
Right, and I think that would be kind of a next step is once we pick a park and decide what we want to do, we'll start looking at equipment and what prices are and but man, there's so many different pieces of equipment to try and just give you, and if you like, I mean, you can certainly come by our office and we'll give you one of these books and you can get an idea. But there's every gamut of price and again, this usually when we get the price out of the book is just the equipment. It doesn't include the poured in place and the concrete underneath of it and all the other things that necessarily go with it.
I think if we even just came up with 10 pieces of equipment,
Mm-hmm.
and then, like, I don't have any construction background. So then if I say, well, I want this, and it looks cheap on here, and it looks like we can get 10 to fill that void, but you would know that other component of, well, that piece costs this amount. So if we,
Well, and like I said, once we pick which parks we want to make improvements to, then we can look at where, based on sizing. I mean, again, if we put a swing in and it has a bigger fall, that's got to be further away from things, then we got to start looking at things about paths getting to it. And so, I mean, the constructability of it can change depending on which park it goes on and which feature it is. So that, like I said, the first thing is just choosing where we want to make our improvements. If we want to pick a park or we want to pick multiple parks, then from there we can start putting together, okay, we could do, and probably that's what we would do is we'd come back the next meeting and say, here's options A, B, and C. Which one of these would you like to go with?
does anyone feel prepared to give their recommendation on which parks that they'd like to see?
I haven't given it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I'll send this information out to the full board. I think it'd be premature to do it today. I mean, I think we want to get input from Megan and Shauna both, and I'll send, like I said, I'll send that information out. I'll send some links to playground, some that you guys can look at too if you want to, if you're so inclined. Click on it and you can look at different. I mean, you can start looking at different types of equipment and some of those things. Like I said, I don't think the links to these catalogs necessarily show what the fall zones and stuff are of them, but it'll
Lions Club
give you
Park,
some.
new set of swings. Swings are the cheapest to put in. Our guys put in all the time, but the fall zone is so huge. And that poured in place last time we looked at $14 a square foot. That's just the rubber stuff. That's not counting concrete.
Mm.
So that little one at Centennial, that round thing, you'll see that's the exact fall zone. We have sand around, that's how big it needs to be. That little merry-go-round's not nearly as big, but the swings have the biggest fall zone of anything, because you can go 20 feet that way, or you can fly 20 feet that way, and you gotta have, that's
And
huge.
pretty
fall
much anything new that we put in is gonna require the port in place. They don't recommend the wood chips anymore. I mean, it's fine for the existing parks, but everything now is gonna be poured in place. Like I said, even the bid we got, I mean, each one of those had a 20 by 30 pad around it. So you can kind of see in that bottom picture of that merry-go-round how they, you know, they pour the pad around it, and then the grass surfaces. Well, you'd need, you know, at some point in time, you need a sidewalk leading up to the where they transition off the sidewalk onto the port in place.
Obviously, like we need a solid structure or whatever, but there are some articles out there about the port in place or the rubber actually being tied to different leukemia and stuff. So
I think that was a while back. I mean, I think that some of the new products, I haven't necessarily seen that, or I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen those articles. I mean, back 10 years ago, that was a big concern, but I think they've modified what they're using for the components in the port in place. I mean, you see the port in place almost exclusively now, and I'll send you the link. There's a law or a ruling on ADA where it actually references back to the port in place. So I think a lot of that stuff has gotten taken care of. We see it in pool areas. I mean, they're using this stuff more and more in a lot of different places. So
because I was happy the Sixth Street, like some of them, you know, I remember like you could smell it as soon as you opened up the car door because it just smelled like that rubber, you know. But I've never smelled at the Sixth Street, so maybe they got rid of some of those.
some of that's the glue too. So I mean, basically all that stuff is it's real fine particles. And the glue is what holds it together. So some of the smell that you smell is associated with the glue, the bonding agent. And once it dries and cures, you don't have that. I mean, they really literally, they trowel that out like asphalt.
Wow.
And that's why we're able to repair it. We can cut out a square section and repair it. And really the only difference, you don't see a seam, you don't see anything. It's probably a little bit of discoloration. You know, if it's out in the sun and again, that's kind of why we try and pick certain colors for that stuff too, is some wear better than others and whatnot. But
So at the next meeting, we'll choose the parks and discuss some of the equipment that we're looking at.
April 5th is that's our regularly scheduled quarterly meeting. So it just kind of fit right. I mean, it's roughly a month from now, and that seemed like that would work well. I mean, typically we're going to have meetings once a quarter, unless like we considered this one a special meeting. You know, that's the standard is they're the first Tuesday of the month. Quarterly unless as needed, and so this was an as needed meeting, so that we could get moving on this.
And I'm open to, you know, meeting more than 4 times a.
The one thing I will throw out there, and we might try, and I might take a poll. I know it seems like Megan and Shauna have they're able to come to meetings later in the day. So maybe if that works for everybody, we could do maybe an early afternoon or after work meeting or something. They don't necessarily have to be at 7 a.m. Because it would be nice to have everybody here. But so I might throw that out there and just, again, reply back to me. As long as we can get a quorum, we can have a meeting. And I'll send all this information out to everybody.
Later in the day, well, like 6 o'clock would work great. It might be too late for you, but that way I don't have to take the day off for
Never
work.
too late for me.
Or a 4 a.m. meeting with
Sure.
Rick. We'll be there.
Good. Any other, we'll move on, and any other matters the board would like to discuss? Daniel? We'll be, and probably at our April, well, I don't know what our April meeting we will. We're getting ready to start working on budgets. I know I did get an email from Daniel the other day scheduling budgets, so we're going to start working on 2023 budgets. I don't think we'll have anything in place by April, but certainly probably by the June meeting, July meeting, it'll be finalized. So that's one thing I guess we'll be working on.
And Rick and I have an infrastructure advisory meeting tomorrow. Just sort of pass this on.
All right, with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 8:06. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.